Tonight, a guilty verdict. Will Donald Trump go to jail, and what does his conviction mean for the US election? Also tonight, surgeries cancelled as a state of emergency is called in SA's hospitals. Uncertainty remains over how many people were killed in Papua New Guinea's devastating landslide. And the Matildas take on China in Adelaide as players vie for Olympic spots. Good evening, Richard Davies with ABC News. Guilty on all counts. That's the verdict from a jury that's turned Donald Trump from a former commander-in-chief into a convicted felon. 12 everyday Americans voted unanimously in a historic hush money trial that's tested the resilience of the American justice system. Leading our coverage tonight, North American Bureau Chief Jade McMillan, who's been following the trial in New York.
I'm outside the court where US history was made. Finally, a verdict in this case and a legal reckoning for a former president. But the political impact of this decision won't be fully understood until Americans vote in November. One of Donald Trump's last moments before becoming a convicted felon. It took a jury of 12 ordinary New Yorkers a day and a half to reach a verdict, declaring the former president guilty of all 34 counts of falsifying business records.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people.
The jury found Donald Trump falsified the records to cover up hush money paid to porn star Stormy Daniels on the eve of the 2016 election, to silence her claim of a sexual encounter a decade earlier and protect his campaign.
We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man.
Trump's lawyers will likely appeal against the verdict. His supporters echoed his argument that he'd been unfairly targeted.
I never voted for him the first time, but we'll do it this time. It's a disgrace.
Even if Trump goes to jail, gets out, or gets bail, or whatever, we're all going to vote for Trump still.
But others were overjoyed at the decision to make Donald Trump the first ever former US president convicted of a crime.
I don't expect him to go to jail, but a lie is a lie and a conviction is a conviction.
Trump is facing a potential prison term, but many legal experts expect the judge would take his lack of a prior criminal record into account and consider probation.
I'm so pleased that there's finally some accountability for Donald Trump.
The man who brought the case, Democratic District Attorney Alvin Bragg, insists it was handled like any other.
And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors.
But in a polarised America 5 months out from the election, the political impact is yet to be measured. President Joe Biden's campaign releasing a statement arguing no one is above the law. The only way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office is at the ballot box. Donald Trump's wife Melania was absent from the trial, so too his daughter Ivanka. But she posted to Instagram, "I love you, Dad." International reaction has been more tempered.
I obviously have, people might have observed, a close relationship with President Biden. We get on very well, but the relationship between Australia and the United States is a relationship between nations, not just between individuals.
Donald Trump will be sentenced in July, just days before he's expected to be confirmed as the Republican nominee. Donald Trump's conviction came after weeks of painstaking testimony of sex scandals, tabloids and cover-ups. A former ally turned against him, offering key evidence for prosecutors to secure their win in the hush money case.
From US president to convicted felon on 34 counts, Donald Trump's trial was a salacious and unpredictable affair. At its centre, whether the former president falsified business records to cover up a bribe paid to porn star Stormy Daniels during his 2016 campaign.
This fake case was brought only to interfere with the upcoming 2024 election, and it should be dropped immediately.
96 random civilians were whittled down until 12 took their place in the jury. Each day drawing throngs of vocal supporters and opponents, as well as global media. The prosecution's witness list included everyone from political spin doctors to the former president's close friends. Among them, tabloid publisher David Pecker. He testified he'd been involved in a scheme burying news stories that could have damaged Mr. Trump's first run at the White House. When Ms. Daniels took the stand, she aired explicit details of their sexual encounter at the heart of the hush money payment, prompting the defence to call for a mistrial, a request the judge ultimately rejected. The prosecution's star witness, though, was Michael Cohen, Trump's former personal attorney and political problem solver. He told the jury the former president had known everything and had covered it up to protect his campaign. Testimony from a former right-hand man proving key to the conviction handed down in this courthouse in downtown Manhattan.
Perhaps more than anything, Donald Trump is a product of New York City. His brash demeanour and the kind of business approach many here would call hustle have also defined his life in the public eye. In New York, Donald Trump built his name. And today, 12 New Yorkers bestowed a new title, convicted criminal.
With 2 impeachments and civil trials finding him liable for sexual assault and fraud, this isn't the first time Donald Trump has made US political history for the wrong reasons, and it might not be the last. He still faces another 3 criminal cases, 2 relating to alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election result, and 1 over the handling of classified documents. But they're unlikely to go to trial before US voters choose their next president in November. Carrington Clark, ABC News, New York.
Well, Donald Trump has managed to galvanise support off the back of all of his criminal cases, easily winning the Republican nomination earlier this year. North America correspondent Barbara Miller joins me now from Washington. Barbara, Donald Trump is due to be officially confirmed as the Republican nominee just days after he's sentenced. How has the party responded?
Look, we've really seen top Republicans rally around Donald Trump. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, for example, saying it was a shameful day in American history, and that kind of sentiment echoed by many of Donald Trump's allies. But even those who have a more complicated relationship with the former president have come out in support of him. I'm thinking there of Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, for example, saying that the charges should never have been brought. Not much room for dissent then, at least tonight. And in fact, when one well-known Republican, Larry Hogan, came out and said that the rule of law should be respected, he was immediately shot down by a top campaign official. What's going to be interesting is how this plays with the voting public. And polls have consistently shown that if he's actually convicted, that some Republicans would reconsider whether or not to vote for Donald Trump.
And what about Joe Biden's campaign? How's it playing this?
Well, we saw that very quick response from the Biden campaign saying that the verdict showed that no one was above the law, but also really trying to drive home the message that, felon or not, Donald Trump will be contesting this November's election. And the only way, they said, to keep him out of the Oval Office is at the ballot box. I think that's partly a call to Democrats to turn out in November, and that's amid concerns that Joe Biden is losing support among some key constituencies. Now, we haven't heard directly from Joe Biden today. He initially didn't comment on this trial. More recently, he's chosen to mock Donald Trump over it, and we saw that stunt this week from the Biden campaign where they sent Robert De Niro down to the courthouse. So I think there's still trying to work out how to play this. Now, of course, it's all about the money, and the Republican side is saying that one of their websites crashed because of the flow of donations coming in the wake of this verdict. That will be a concern if it's true to the Biden campaign, and something else, Jade, to watch over the coming days.
Barbara Miller in Washington, thank you. As Americans digest the verdict, there are major questions hanging over Donald Trump's campaign for the White House. Our Global Affairs editor, John Lyons, has more.
Donald Trump will be sentenced on the 11th of July. Each count carries a maximum sentence of 4 years. So prison time is possible, but legal experts believe it's highly unlikely.
Likely, Mr. Trump will receive a non-custodial term and possibly a fine and so forth.
Whether he ends up behind bars or not, Donald Trump can still run for president. There is a precedent. In 1920, the socialist candidate Eugene Debs ran from prison while serving a 10-year sentence. He got 3% of the vote. And what if Trump wins in November? Could he pardon himself? Not only is that power untested, it only applies to federal crimes, and this conviction happened in a state court. So that would leave him relying on the New York governor, and she's a Democrat.
There's still plenty to play out in the United States over the next 5 months as we get closer to the election. But for now, that's all from an historic day here in New York City.
North American Bureau Chief Jade McMillan there. Elective surgeries have been cancelled and an internal state of emergency has been called across South Australia's public hospital system as it grapples with what the government says is unprecedented demand. The emergency is expected to last for a week, with health officials saying 20 non-urgent surgeries have been postponed today alone.
Simone King has spent months waiting to have her gallbladder removed. When she arrived at the Royal Adelaide Hospital for scheduled surgery on Friday, she was sent home.
Very concerned because I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people that have got more problems than I have that need to be seen to.
All elective surgeries except urgent Category 1 and Category 2 paediatric operations have been delayed by SA Health as it grapples with a system-wide code yellow or internal emergency.
I haven't called a code yellow before, so I think it goes without saying that we thought this was a very serious state we were in.
What this suggests is that the whole of the system is now in crisis.
SA Health says respiratory illnesses are helping drive hospital demand. At least 270 health workers are off sick with COVID, and more than 140 hospital patients have COVID or the flu.
We currently have 200 more patients in our hospital than the same time last year, and that's a significant uplift for our system.
The wait lists are very large and they just seem to keep growing and growing and growing.
As well as delaying elective surgeries, SA Health has opened all available hospital beds and asked private hospitals to treat more public patients.
Labor said they'd fix this. They said they'd fix the ramping crisis. They said they'd fix the hospital system, and it has gone to pieces under their watch.
There are hundreds of extra beds that are needed across the system, and that's why we are doing exactly that. Would I like all of those beds to be available yesterday? Of course I would.
It's not just metropolitan hospitals affected by elective surgery delays.
People here are really isolated and they are already cut off from services. So to have somebody in the city say, well, you can't have this as well, just adds to the woes of the country people.
SA Health says patients in need won't be turned away from hospitals despite the internal emergency. Stephanie Richards, ABC News.
Papua New Guinea Prime Minister James Marape has made his first visit to disaster-hit Enga province a week after a landslide killed what's thought to be hundreds of people there. Foreign Affairs correspondent Stephen Jedgetts has been travelling with the Prime Minister, and apologies in advance for the quality of the audio here.
More than a week since a landslide devastated the village of Mulitaka, relief is starting to flow through. These villagers are being gifted blankets and clothes, but there's still a yawning gap between what people here need and what the PNG government and the international community is as yet able to provide. Today, James Marape came to the village to express what he called his profound sorrow at the devastating loss of life, with many bodies still buried underneath the rubble.
Our global network of family nations who continue to support us
as I named them already. They all have come together, expressed condolence and offered love, care, support to us, so we can find comfort in the fact that we're not alone.
As the recovery drags on slowly, attention's now turning to another threat, the prospect of more landslides. PNG officials say perhaps up to 10,000 people may need to be moved because they're at risk of being swallowed by a collapsing mountain. Another heavy burden for this area, settlements that are still recovering from devastation on a scale they've never seen before.
Stephen Jedget's there. An Australian woman who was seriously injured in the turbulent Singapore Airlines flight has been evacuated from Thailand and is being treated at an Adelaide hospital. Kerry Jordan's husband, Keith Davies, pushed for the couple to be flown back home after Mrs. Jordan went through emergency surgery for a serious spinal injury at a Bangkok hospital. One person was killed and dozens injured when the flight from London to Singapore was buffeted by severe turbulence. Mr. Davies says they're grateful for the outpouring of support as they fought to return to Australia.
I can't speak for Kerry, but I'm imagining you're just hanging on, you know? You're holding on. It's like, it's not going to be today, it's going to be tomorrow. It wasn't today, it's going to be tomorrow.
New Zealand's Prime Minister has expressed grave concerns about Australia's plan to change immigration policy following the latest controversy about visas. Australia regularly deports foreign-born criminals, which has frustrated New Zealand as many deportees have spent most of their lives in Australia. Last year, the Albanese government directed tribunals to take into account ties to Australia when considering such cases. But that's about to be changed after revelations a string of foreigners convicted of serious violent offences have remained in the country. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the change is in Australia's national interest, which has frustrated Wellington.
Raise in very clear terms our grave concerns about the change to that policy. You know, as we well know, it's not fair that actually we get deportees coming back to New Zealand that have got very little connection or no connection to this country. That's not right.
Former Liberal staffer Bruce Lehrmann has met the deadline to lodge a notice of appeal with the federal court as he moves to defend a finding that on the balance of probabilities he did rape Brittany Higgins at Parliament House in 2019. Bruce Lehrmann lost his bid to sue Network 10 and journalist Lisa Wilkinson over an interview with Miss Higgins on The Project when Justice Michael Lee found 10 had proved its truth defence. He launched the defamation action after his criminal trial was abandoned with no findings against him. The notice lodged this afternoon comes as the federal court considers the final figure for costs awarded against Mr. Lehrmann in the defamation case. No details have been released about the terms of the appeal. US President Joe Biden has allowed Ukraine to fire into Russian territory using American weapons. Biden's order only applies to the northeastern Kharkiv region, which has been the focus of a Russian cross-border offensive in recent weeks. Until now, Ukrainian soldiers haven't been allowed to hit Russian positions behind the frontier because of fears this would escalate the conflict. The US is Ukraine's largest supplier of weapons, and Kyiv had complained the restrictions had been hobbling its defence of the country's second largest city. Russia hasn't commented on the policy change. To finance now, and it was a strong day for the local share market, while shares of Donald Trump's social media company fell after he was found guilty in his New York criminal trial. Here's David Chow.
Well, right after Donald Trump was found guilty in his hush money trial, the odds of Joe Biden winning the next US election surged, but not by enough, as the odds still favour Trump getting his old job back, even in the unlikely event that he goes to jail. The guilty verdict also had an effect on the share price of his social media company, Trump Media, which dropped more than 6% in after-hours trade. But overall, he's still doing okay financially. If Trump Media were to be listed here, its $13.8 billion market valuation would make it the 38th biggest company on the ASX, just behind IAG and well ahead of Qantas, two companies which actually make money. Its share price has quadrupled over the past year, despite an $87 million loss last year and just $6 million in revenue. As you can see here, its share price is extremely volatile and driven mainly by sentiment towards Donald Trump himself rather than actual fundamentals. Meanwhile, it's been a good day for the All Ords, which jumped 1% in a single session as investors bought the dip. But it's down 0.4% for the week after all those falls in the last few days. And Telix Pharmaceuticals, with its 15% surge, was the best performing stock after it announced positive test results from a trial of its prostate cancer drugs. Overseas, Wall Street fell 0.6%, while share markets in Europe and Japan rose. There was a big fall in oil and iron ore prices while gold was flat, and the Aussie dollar is buying 66.3 US cents. And that's finance.
The Matildas are back in action tonight, ramping up their preparations for the Paris Olympics with a two-match series against China. Reporter Brianna Fiore is at Adelaide Oval ahead of the first of those two friendlies. Brianna, we saw Australia fall in love with the Matildas during last year's World Cup. Has the hype continued there tonight?
It sure has, and the rain hasn't kept fans away tonight. People are streaming through Adelaide Oval to catch a glimpse of the Golden Girls, with the Matildas and China set to kick off shortly. Now, the Matildas will be without star striker Sam Kerr, who has been sidelined with an ACL injury. Katrina Gorry will also miss tonight's match. Unfortunately for Kerr, she won't make it back in time for the Paris Olympics in 2 months' time, but Gorry still remains a chance. Tonight's match is just a friendly, but a lot is still at stake. Several of the Matildas will be putting their case forward as to why they deserve a spot on the plane to Paris, with Australia only able to select a squad of 18. We spoke to some fans earlier, including some players who were around when the Matildas first made their start.
I'm original Matilda from 1979. We started women's soccer in Adelaide.
I want to be a Matilda one day and they're a big inspiration to me.
We really like girls and celebrating our mummy and mama.
I remember years ago there wasn't really many people in the crowds at all, and now suddenly it's a sold-out game tonight.
I think we might be going to watch a soccer match somewhere. Is that right?
Yeah. It's the 14th consecutive sold-out Matildas match on home soil, with one more game to be played in Sydney on Monday. And as you can see, fans of all ages just can't get enough. Richard?
Thanks, Brianna Fiore reporting there. Port Adelaide coach Ken Hinkley says his side is still in the mix for the AFL flag despite last night's loss to Carlton. But Hinkley says Port still has plenty to sort out to keep its premiership assault on track.
When it came to the crunch, Port Adelaide couldn't match Carlton.
Can Cripps do it again? What is that?
They were better than us in the last quarter, but it's hard to deny, isn't it? They spanked us there.
An 8-goal last quarter blitz demolished the Power.
Falls to Williams. Blues get another one.
They went to another level and around the ball particularly, and they were able to go forward and score. They were just dominant in the last quarter. So we get some more clarity on where we need to continue to chase, and that's okay.
The Power's under siege defence suddenly began making mistakes under pressure, allowing the Blues to overcome a poor Adelaide Oval record.
Feels like we're sort of playing every team in the top 8 right now, or close to the top 4. So we've been challenged in a lot of areas, but as a result, we've found out more about ourselves, and we certainly rose to it tonight.
It's not the first time Port has failed against a fellow contender, but there's no panic from Ken Hinkley.
In that mid-tier, that's a big group of teams that are fighting. There's clearly one side that's standing out, but the rest are trying to still sort it out. On tonight's game, we've still got a lot more to do and a lot more to sort out.
However, he admits the probable return of captain Connor Rozee and Willie Rioli against the Giants in a fortnight is sorely needed. Matthew Smith, ABC News.
Australia's Alex de Minaur and Thanasi Kokkinakis are through to the third round at the French Open. It comes as organisers clamp down on loud fans, with no more drinking allowed among spectators.
Another epic comeback, which was his second 5-setter in a row. He sets up a reunion in the third round with the powerful American 12th seed Taylor Fritz.
I've known Taylor for ages. We grew up together. We had the same management growing up. I've played him a couple of times. Obviously, he's had a great career and a very good player.
Australia's top-ranked star Alex de Minaur is through to the third round for the first time at Roland Garros. He had a straight sets win over Spain's Jaume Munar.
Feels good. It feels like I've finally broken a barrier down.
De Minaur was asked to sign some wine glasses after the match, but they won't be seeing any action near the courts, with organisers banning the consumption of alcohol in the stands.
Djokovic is not happy.
Rowdy fans have been yelling at players during rallies. Belgium's David Goffin says someone threw gum at him.
I support a player standing up, against people who are disrespecting and heckling him.
Organisers hope the booze ban will keep the crowd in check over the remaining 9 days and appease the players. Bindi Bryce, ABC News.
It's been more than 50 years since a female driver has qualified for a Formula One Grand Prix. A new global initiative is hoping to change that statistic by developing the next generation of young talent.
Meet the young racer looking to level the playing field in motorsports.
I don't really care if it's like a girls' sport. I just want to be like the best of the best.
12-year-old Lana Flack can't legally drive a car, but she's on track to becoming a Formula One racer. The Brisbane schoolgirl is one of 6 young women handpicked from around the world to take part in the More Than Equal program, designed to help females bridge the gender gap.
There's been an absence of females at the top end of our sport for 50 years, and there's no reason why that should happen.
But it hasn't been all smooth racing.
Some boys are supportive, other boys aren't. Most of them take me out and bully me.
Lana's dad, who's no stranger to racing cars, agrees it's time for change.
Over the last few years, obviously, I think a lot of racing dads have got their little girls into the motorsport scene as well. At the end of the day, it's really exciting to see, and I think there's a good future for it.
The program is research-driven with the goal of creating a new generation of racing talent. It's also hoping it will create the first female F1 champion, and Lana's confident she's in pole position.
I want to be like the first female to win a championship and get the most podiums.
Speeding past the stereotype. Ariana Levy, ABC News, Brisbane.
Time to check the weather details now. First, a look at tonight's photo taken by Crystal Bailey. It shows tawny frogmouth owls. It was a fine start to the day, but conditions turned wet around lunchtime, reaching a high of 17.5 after an overnight low of 11.4. Further afield, winds were strong and gusty about southern coastal areas overnight, and there were storms there today, with showers about the agricultural area. A cloud band across the north gradually cleared to the east throughout the day. 19 was the top in Woomera and 17 in Minlaton. A cloud band stretching from the northwest of the country to New South Wales brought widespread rain today. Tomorrow, an east coast low looks to deepen and increase strong winds, waves and heavy rain in the east. A front in the southwest will bring a few showers there, while a high keeps most other areas dry. Rain for Brisbane and Sydney tomorrow, with showers in Melbourne and Perth. Fine for the other capitals, partly cloudy and 13 degrees for Hobart, sunny and 34 for Darwin, cooler in the Alice with a top of 18. Back home, frosty about the west coast with showers over the east and northeast, clearing during the evening, 22 for Oodnadatta and 17 for Port Augusta. Areas of morning frost and fog about the southeast, then a fine day throughout. Top temperatures in the major centres ranging from 14 in Clare to 18 in Kingscote. Cold overnight conditions have prompted a frost warning for the upper and lower southeast. Fine and partly cloudy for Adelaide tomorrow, with the slight chance of a shower about the northern suburbs. 18 for the city after a chilly night, dropping to 5 degrees. East to southeasterly winds about 10 knots, with seas below half a metre. The sun will rise around 7:15 and set roughly 10 hours later. Sunny on Sunday with 17 degrees, fine until Wednesday when showers arrive. They'll continue into Thursday with 18 again, and fine for this time next week. And that's the news this Friday. Thanks for your company. Enjoy your evening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Good night.